We talk about ourselves all the time, but what if the way we think about who we are is, well, a little bit off? Today, we're going to dig into a really powerful idea about the human self and what happens when our ego kind of takes us down the wrong road. So, this whole idea starts with something super simple, something you've probably said a million times. We talk about our most essential parts, our body, our mind, our soul, as if they're things we own. They belong to us. But that leads to this huge, profound question, right? If your body is yours, and your mind is yours, and even your soul is yours, then who exactly is the you that possesses all of them? Who is the I that's at the very center of everything? Well, the source we're looking at gives us an answer. This self isn't just one thing. It's not just your thoughts, it's not just your feelings, it's like the whole orchestra. It's the total being that shows up when all those parts come together to create the I we talk about. And this is where things get really critical. Because when we misunderstand this true, complete self, or we just ignore it, that's when what the source calls diseases of the ego start to creep in. We're talking about really deep problems with our identity that cause a ton of inner chaos. Okay, so let's get into it. The source points to two main ways the ego gets all twisted up when that real sense of self is lost. It basically splits into two really unhealthy extremes. And what's so fascinating here is that they're really just two sides of the same broken coin. You've got the fragile ego, which is always looking for someone else to blame, and then you have the inflated ego, which is always looking for external labels to make it feel important. See the pattern? Both of them are completely dependent on the outside world. So first, let's zoom in on that fragile ego. This is the ego whose number one job is to protect itself. And it does that by just refusing to accept responsibility for, well, for anything. And the source just lays it out so perfectly. When something goes wrong, the fragile ego's first reaction is to point the finger. It's not even just a one-time excuse. It's a constant, automatic habit of pushing blame onto anything and anyone else. So the key takeaway here is this goes way beyond just trying to get out of a little trouble. This is a total surrender of personal accountability. The list of who's at fault is literally endless, which guarantees that the fragile ego can always play the victim and never, ever has to look in the mirror. All right, now let's flip that coin over and look at the other extreme, the inflated ego. This one isn't deflecting blame, oh no. It's out there aggressively collecting external labels to build this fake sense of being better than everyone else. So its sense of value has nothing to do with character or kindness or what you actually do. It's all about where you come from, your family name, your tribe, your ancestry. And the source points out how damaging this is, especially when it's taught to kids, basically programming them to feel superior for no real reason. And this is just a perfect illustration of how it works. Identity becomes nothing more than a list of things to brag about. The self is just this collection of external tags with no real substance on the inside. It's a house of cards, really. And this kind of thinking, constantly reminding yourself and everyone else about your great lineage, it leads to what the source calls a narcissistic need to dominate. You feel like you have to be on top, not because you've earned it, but just because of the status you've declared for yourself. So, what happens when you're ruled by either of these troubled egos? You end up with this fundamental split in your personality. You become two different people. There's the person you are in public, and then there's the completely different person you are behind closed doors. That inner conflict, it's a direct result of an unhealthy ego. So, okay, if the fragile ego and the inflated ego are the problem, then what's the solution? Well, thankfully, the source points us toward a different path. A path of humility and a whole new way of understanding ourself. The antidote to all that ego-driven arrogance and defensiveness is found right here, in these four qualities. To be humble, to be submissive and obedient, and that doesn't mean being a doormat, but it means yielding to truth and higher principles instead of your own ego's demands. And, maybe the most important one, to always be questioning. And that last part is so crucial. Think about it. A fragile ego is terrified of questions because they might expose its weaknesses. An inflated ego just waves questions away because it thinks it already knows everything. But a healthy, authentic self, it actually welcomes questions because it knows that's how we grow, that's how we learn. And that brings us right back to where we started, with a question. But this time, the question isn't for some ancient text to answer, it's for us. In your day-to-day life, in your private thoughts, in how you react to things, which ego are you feeding? The one that blames, the one that boasts, or the humble self that's just trying to learn? That's the real introspection we're being invited to do.